Hello, this is Anna here with a functional core workout that is completely portable, that is intelligently designed, and that you can do totally in the comfort of your own home. The only thing that you will need is something comfortable to lay on, whether it be a rug, a yoga mat, a beach towel. There are three other things that are optional. They may come in handy. You may want to have a pillow or other relatively soft object. A large towel would work. You may want to have a small towel like a washcloth or a dishcloth that you can fold as support for your low back eventually. And then if any of these movements are something where you want to add a little bit of weight, a dumbbell, a kettlebell, or a medicine ball is helpful but is totally optional. So this functional core workout is going to take you through four different categories of core movements. We think of our core typically as like our six-pack muscles, and it's very maybe vanity based, but your core is very much more than just the superficial muscles that we can see. Your core is the muscles of breathing, your diaphragm, the muscles that support your spine, which are tons of small muscles that work together synergistically to hold you upright. And the muscles of your abdominals are not just your six-pack muscles. There's a deep layer underneath that which is very important in moving efficiently. The muscles of your obliques, which are important in twisting and bending. So the different categories of this workout is going to hit really the entire musculature of your core in, again, a very intelligent way rather than just doing maybe endless sit-ups or endless crunches. So you can do this workout in multiple different formats. You could do this as an interval-based workout where you say work for 30 seconds, rest for 30 seconds, or you work for 45 seconds, you rest for 15 seconds. Our core muscles are endurance-based. They favor firing at low levels, but all of the time. They are what work to keep you upright in just everyday standing and sitting so you're not just collapsed on the floor like a blob. So they're not muscles for extreme power, extreme force, but they are muscles that respond best to being worked with perfect form, with impeccable quality, but under relatively low levels of load. So we're not using any huge heavy weights here, doing anything extreme as far as loading them. So you can do an interval-based workout where you work and then you rest. You could do this workout as just straight reps and sets. Maybe you pick that you're going to do 5 repetitions of each exercise that you choose for 3 sets, just for example. Or my favorite, you could do this workout as a reverse pyramid where you do 10 of all the movements, then 9 of all the movements, then 8 of all the movements, and you travel up the pyramid. And if you're just starting off, you could certainly do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can make this totally your own. This is your workout that you can customize. And with all of the different ways you can do this, there are thousands of combinations as far as how you can make this work for you. So our movements are going to fall into 4 different categories. And this is going to be about me demonstrating and explaining all of the movements. And then you get to turn off the video and be set free and create your workout and do that the way that you want to do it. You're going to get to pick from isometric type movements where our core is holding our body relatively motionless and stabilizing us. You'll pick from spinal flexion movements where we're doing a bending forward motion. So think your conventional sit-ups or curl-ups. You'll do rotational movements where your obliques are working to keep your body stable as it moves from side to side. And then you'll do what I call dynamic low back stabilization, where your limbs are moving, but it's very much about your core holding your low back very stable. With all of these movements, I have 3 little caveats for you. Number 1 is breathing. Don't hold your breath during these movements. It is common that you've heard like exhale on exertion, which can be very true and very effective. As long as you're breathing fully and deeply during these, that is perfectly fine. The second caveat is how to truly engage your deep intrinsic core muscles. So in a very basic sense, and I have a background as a Pilates instructor as well as being a multifaceted fitness professional, so this is not a Pilates specific video, but we want to think about pulling the navel in and up. So you can do that with me right now in the video, wherever you're sitting or standing, or if you're even laying down. think like you're putting on a custom fit pair of pants. They fit perfectly. You don't have to suck in, you don't have to strain, but they are molded to your body. And so pulling the navel in and up and holding that contraction allows us to engage our transverse abdominis, which is our deepest core muscle. And it's not a natural kind of subconscious thing to do. We have to think about it. But that is going to recruit our core in the most efficient way. It's going to transfer into better movements. It's going to allow you to get the most out of these core exercises. And it's going to transfer into better looking abdominals because you are using more of the musculature. So when we're doing any kind of bending forward, any kind of, let's say, holding a plank, we want to have that pulling in and up feeling, that scooping in and up. We don't want the abdominals to just be kind of loose and bulging out, because then we're just working the superficial musculature. We're not really getting at the deep musculature. My third caveat for you is always quality over quantity. This is not a race type of workout, and because you're picking your own things and you're choosing the pace and you're choosing the format, this is very much about you're doing a variety of core exercises, you are going through them multiple times, and you are doing them as perfectly as you can. Practice makes perfect, and practice makes permanent. And so if you practice poor movements again and again, they will become part of your body's lexicon, and that's going to be the way that you move. So I have some very helpful tips for you with each movement as far as how to do them so that they are of the highest quality possible. So focusing always on perfect form versus trying to rush through these and just get it done and over with. So some options in all of these different categories, they're kind of grouped loosely from easiest to most difficult, but there are kind of some sub options within each category. So let's get started with our isometric movements, or our motionless movements. So if we're doing these for reps or for time, isometric movement choices, we can start with just a conventional plank. And so for your plank, you can do these in a couple of different ways. So here's where I like to double over my rug here to give some cushion for my elbows. If you do have shoulder issues and putting weight on your shoulders and elbows is painful for you, you can totally plank using a countertop, a high table, just to get some stress off of the upper body. But our body is one straight line, and really hyper focusing here on that belted effect, that pulling the navel in and up. I'm going to tuck in my shirt a little bit so you can see what I mean. My behind is not super high, it's not super low. I'm right here, one nice straight line, and I'm actually pushing my feet together. I'm squeezing my inner thighs together to make this whole one big nice cylinder of power. Moving through this, we can do what's called an up-down plank. So rotating slightly, coming up onto your hands, and then coming down onto your elbows. There is some rotation involved with this. You can see I'm rotating slightly, so that's fine. But what we want to minimize is any kind of like sloppy, kind of out of control movement as you're rotating. Think lowering your body very precisely, like you're lowering down onto a sheet of ice. So that's a first option for an isometric movement. Second option is a hollow rock. And yeah, we're moving with this a bit, but it is primarily about the core staying relatively motionless. So your easiest option is to lay on your back. You could have your head down for this if you need to. If your head is up, your chin is tucked to your chest, you're looking towards your navel, your arms are at your sides, and you're rocking back and forth, keeping your shoulders down, pulling your belly in. To make this a little bit harder, extend the legs away from you, extend your arms overhead, little shallow rocks, back and forth is one. And then for the last isometric choice, we're gonna do a version of a side plank. And again, double over your mat, your towel, to give your shoulders some cushion. This is another one that you can totally do on a more elevated surface. Maybe picking the arm of your couch is a good idea if putting too much stress on that shoulder is not great for you. So I am barefoot right now, so it's a little bit uncomfortable to stack the bones of my ankles on top of each other. It's easier if you're wearing shoes. You can also stagger your feet and then allow yourself to have that nice stable base. So pushing up into the side plank, my hips are stacked, my shoulders are stacked, my arm can go here on one nice long straight line. I'm gonna dip my hips toward the mat and then push them back up. Dipping them down and then pulling them back to that straight line. What I often see in people is they need to actually push their hips forward a little bit more to make their body straight. So lowering down and then lifting, and you start to really feel that in your obliques, in the side of your abs that's close to the mat. And obviously you would do each side. So your isometric movements. For your spinal flexion, so we're gonna hit some conventional curl-ups or sit-ups, but I have some specific ways that I like to do them as a fitness professional so that you are doing the smartest thing for your body. Curl-ups, one leg is bent and one leg is straight. The reason for that, let me actually sit up so I'm not talking to you laying on the ground. The reason for that is because if we do that, we can put more torque on our pelvis. And what that basically means is we can recruit our abdominals better if one leg is bent and one leg is straight versus both legs bent, both legs straight. There's an expert in back health named Dr. Stuart McGill, and this is his McGill curl up. This is how he says, okay, this is how we all should curl up for the best health of our low backs and of our core. So one leg bent, one leg straight. You can have your hands at your sides, or you can have your hands behind your head. Regardless of what happens when you curl up, you want to make sure you're not tugging and pulling on your head. The hands are just there as a little bit of a rest and a support for your head. I tuck my chin so that I have a little bit of space between my chin and my chest, and then curling up, flattening out the abdominals. It's not about how far I curl up, it's about the quality of that curl up. Can I keep the elbows wide? Can I zip up my navel as I curl up? You may prefer to just have the hands slide forward here as well. So that is a low-key option for you. Sit-ups are another option. You can do sit-ups in a variety of ways. You can do them with both of your legs straight. You can do them with the soles of your feet together, which are called butterfly sit-ups. You can pinch a pillow or a towel in between your calves and your feet to allow you to sit up a little bit more effectively. And you can really work on that articulation of your spine and that tall posture sitting all the way up. If you are feeling kind of spicy, you can of course add some weight to these sit-ups, but again, don't get roped into, okay, I'm gonna do a ton of these really fast with really heavy weight. Still having them nice and focused and controlled. So sitting all the way up. You could even add a little bit of shoulder work here if you really wanted to. And doing whatever variation of that feels best for you. Our last option for spinal flexion is probably the most advanced exercise that I'm going to show you. If you have existing back or neck issues, I would avoid this one because it is probably not going to be great for your body. So this one is called jackknife, and I start with my hands pressed really firmly into the floor. I'm going to use like all of my triceps and shoulders to keep myself stable. I'm going to scoop in my belly, lift my legs up, and slowly focus on lowering down from my core. So lifting up again and lowering down. Those are tough. Obviously, you're not going to do them fast. It's hard to talk and do them at the same time. You could bend the knees a little bit if you needed to, if that's necessary to get that range of motion. Third category, rotational movements. So things where our body is moving from side to side. One of the first ones I like to show you is called a windshield wiper. You may have heard it called other things. It's because the legs are acting as a windshield wiper. So I'm actually going to turn around and lay flat. So I want to press my shoulders very firmly into the ground. I want to roll them back, really open up the chest, bringing the legs up. Knees bent is going to be the easiest.
And then lowering them to one side, but really hyper-focusing on keeping this shoulder pressed down into the ground, recruiting my obliques to pull the legs back up to center. So right and left here is one. And it's actually very hard to lower them more than about halfway without that shoulder lifting. So I have to like really press this hand in, really hyper-focus on good form to bring them back. You can make this harder by having the legs straight, which is actually quite a bit harder. And this is definitely something where less is more. So we're not trying to get the legs all the way to the ground. Second option for rotational movement is a seated reach and twist. So we've probably all seen like Russian twists. They're weighted, they're heavy, they usually go very fast. And it's really easy to do those incorrectly and have a rounded back, or you're just kind of throwing the weight around. So what I'd like you to do is to sit very tall, to perch up on your sitting bones, having your feet about hip width apart, leaning back to the point where you already feel that you have to use your core as a bit of a challenge to keep you upright. And then having your arms in front of you, still keeping that same impeccable posture, zipping your belly in and up, rotating to one side, tapping the floor, and then coming back. So if you are kind of tight through the chest and shoulders, it's a little stretch for you as well. And then if you'd like to make this a little bit more difficult, you can always lift the legs up and do that same very controlled reach and twist. The last rotational choice that I have for you is a very controlled bicycle crunch. This is another one that's very easy to do. Too fast, incorrect. People are just flailing, pulling at their head and their neck. So starting by laying flat, legs are up in a tabletop position, hands are lightly behind your head, lightly. Don't even clasp your hands because that'll tempt you to pull on your head and neck. Just lay them gently over each other. Right, like so. Elbows are pulled back. Curl up and look right toward your belly button. Gaze at it like it's the most interesting thing you've seen today. Bring your right knee in, twist, and then come back to center. Twist to the other side. So I like to emphasize that coming back to center, because otherwise you get into that habit of just kind of flailing. That's not going to be as effective for your core muscles and for your body. So very precise. It's less about the elbow meeting the knee than getting that full twist and staying very curled up. So we've been now through some choices with isometric movements, some choices with spinal flexion movements, and some choices with rotational movements. Our last category is what I call dynamic lumbar stability movement. So where your low back needs to stay in place, controlled by your strong core muscles. This is where that little washcloth or towel may come in handy. So I like to use this by rolling it up into kind of a little bolster. So we all have a different degree of tilt of our pelvis and how arched our low back may or may not be. We need some arch in our low back because your spine is not perfectly straight, but we don't want too much arch. We don't want too little arch. I tend to have a overly strong back, and so I have a bit more arch in my low back than is maybe the best for my body. So I like to put this underneath my low back as a reminder, like touch this towel, but don't completely press into it. Don't mash it into the ground. So our options for our low back stability are as follows. So starting with a little leg lower and lift. So I have my towel right here. I can feel it underneath me, but I don't want to perceive like I'm mushing it into the ground, nor do I want to not feel it at all. If I don't feel it, you can see some daylight underneath my back. That's not what we want. So this is, again, optional, but it's a nice little support. Zipping up through your center, pulling your belly in, making it nice and flat, taking your legs up to a tabletop position. And then you have the option of lowering them with bent knees, pulling them up from your core, or to make it a little bit more difficult, straightening the legs out, keeping the heels, keeping the inner thighs all wrapped together, lowering down, and then lifting. It's really a much smaller range of motion than you would think to do this correctly. So maybe only lowering down to about 1/3 of the way and then lifting back up. If I lower down too far, you watch the back start to arch, it's coming off of the towel. That's not what we want. So here, less is more. Lowering down and then lifting up. Our second option is a variation on this. It's called a dead bug. You'll see why it's called a dead bug in a moment if you're not familiar with the exercise. Legs are up in tabletop again and arms are up to the ceiling. I'm going to take the opposing pair of limbs, so my right arm and my left leg, and extend them away from each other. The range of motion here can be very small. You want to control the idea that your low back's curve does not change. It stays neutral, doesn't come off the towel, it doesn't mush into the towel. Obviously, the lower and longer that you extend, the more challenging it will be. So starting conservatively at first, then finding that range of motion that feels best for you. Third choice, we're just gonna flip over
and it's going to look like what we just did, but on all fours. So this bird dog exercise is another exercise that back health expert Stuart McGill says, do this because it's so essential to help your spine understand how to stabilize your body. It's very easy to do and it feels good. It feels good on your back. It feels good moving your limbs in opposing directions. So setting up on all fours, your hands are underneath your shoulders, your feet are about hip width apart. Check your spine mentally. You may not be in front of a mirror or a camera, but just check to see like, okay, are you really, really arched? Are you really rounded? We want a happy medium here. So I like to think of the idea that there's a belt around my center kind of pulling me up to the ceiling without overly having me round the back. Shoulders are relaxing away from the ears, sending one leg back, and then sending that opposing limb out in front. And so we're placing them like we're putting them down on a sheet of ice. We're not trying to just move through these as quickly as possible. Think super, super precise. The leg is lifting, and it's not lifting so high that the low back is arching. It's staying at hip height, and then the other arm is extending out. So maintaining that sense of that zipping in and up with your core, as well as using the stabilizer muscles, so using the glute of that extended leg and the shoulder muscles of that extended arm. Think packing them into their sockets. So those are the array of 3 different movement choices, at least 3 with kind of the sub variations, 3 different movement choices in 4 different categories. And now you get to choose your own adventure to make this core workout your own functional, awesome, dynamic fitness routine for the day to keep you moving powerfully and pain-free.